coats, we also had music and entertainment at our white coat ceremony. And it's very exciting to be here again. 2004 was a long time ago, but not that long. So, good evening and welcome. I'd like to thank the faculty, administration, and the alumni committee for the opportunity to address you on this most pivotal day in your lives. It is truly an honor for me to stand here, to reflect for a moment on the start of my own career, and to see the bright and diverse future that you young physicians will bring to the face of medicine. It was not so long ago that I sat right there in the third row, about 3 seats in, nervous, excited, curious, and frankly, still recovering from the culture shock that was Beersheba. Now, several years later, I can look back at that moment, the years to follow, and the breadth of experience, both professional and personal, that I gained. And I stop for a moment and I smile. I feel a sense of calm and accomplishment, but also a sense that there's always so much more to learn, to change, and to experience. When you put on your own white coats, you have just taken the physician's oath ceremony. I want you to savor the moment. Recognize that the depth of responsibility and the transformative influence it will have on your lives will be outstanding. I also want you to take a moment and recognize that your white coat will probably never be as white as it is the first day that you wear it. While I'm sure you have all consulted the most coveted medical encyclopedia, Wikipedia, and conducted a thorough search for the meaning of the white coat ceremony and the physician's oath, there is more to this moment than any piece of literature can adequately describe. While I'm of the firm belief that for each individual in this auditorium, the meaning of this ceremony is different, unique, and dynamic, there does exist an innate and common thread that bonds us all. Having been more the visual learner in medical school and afterwards, I'd like to take a moment to show you 2 paintings that many of you may have already seen by the same artist that are separated by only 14 years in history. These 2 works offer a clear demonstration of the evolution of the medical profession and the first portrayal of the white coat. In the first painting that you see above, in Thomas Aiken's The Gross Clinic, we get our first glance into the operating theater as a conservative operation for osteomyelitis is performed on a young man. We can see the lack of any white coat. Instead, a thick wool coat worn by all of the physicians, rarely washed, never sterilized, representing the formality, the darkness, and the clear division between patient and physician in those times. In contrast, in Thomas Aiken's The Agnew Clinic, completed in 1889, we are again taken into the operating theater where partial mastectomy is underway. We can see the bright white coats, the purity, the clarity, and the connectedness between physician and patient, and for the first time, the presence of a nurse, denoting the core concept of teamwork that frames modern-day medicine. If Thomas Aikens were alive today, and asked again to capture the portrait of modern-day medicine, while the result would likely be a digital image, probably taken on an iPhone, it would capture a group just like the one that sits before me today. A group of students who traveled thousands of miles away from home, from all walks of life, with diverse cultural, religious, and educational backgrounds, to start a unique adventure that no other medical student anywhere will ever experience. You represent the physician who will see beyond the 4 walls of a hospital room, past the intravenous catheters, medications, and sounds that surround the ill. Your eyes will be trained to see the patient first, to recognize that no 2 patients are alike. You will instinctually recognize the cultural, religious, and regional backgrounds that represent the human being in front of you. Because you sit in these seats, you have already chosen to be different, to be the part of what has become a true necessity in the evolution of medicine. You will soon learn to recognize the complex and 3-dimensional factors that define your patient in any city, town, or rural village anywhere in the world. Our world is changing, and there is no longer a template of care that we can apply to every patient we encounter. When I sat here on this very occasion, several years ago, I would not yet recognize the important role that this program would play in my future and the lives of the thousands of patients I have since encountered. Even in a city like New York, an urban metropolis, with over 9 million people, the core principle of recognizing each patient as individual and unique, culturally varied, and religiously diverse have become the most cherished tools in my practice of medicine. As your careers evolve, you will learn quickly that the most important and valuable lessons learned in medicine come from the patients you care for. I'd like to take a few moments to tell you about Mrs. H. Her story is one of the most moving of my career and has changed the way that I view my role in the lives of my patients. It has also demonstrated how important a role these 4 years that I've spent here played in the care of the patients that I take care of today. Mrs. H was admitted to the inpatient service for recurrent abdominal pain in the right upper quadrant. Initially seen in the emergency department, she was discharged since a brief and standard history revealed no imminent threat to life. She was scheduled for follow-up at an alternate facility since she was uninsured and undocumented and could not be seen in our own internal medicine clinics. She returned only 1 week later with continued abdominal pain. She was admitted by the emergency department for what was thought to be a mild viral infection in her abdomen. When I first walked into her room on Wednesday morning at 8:30, I was taken aback. Ms. H was young, only 27 years old, just a few years younger than me at the time, and older than the senior-most resident on my clinical team. Walking into her room, she was like any of us. I found her in her bed, in her own street clothes, on FaceTime, with her friends, via her iPhone. A People magazine was scattered on her desktop, and the nightstand was filled with all of her personal belongings. An iPad lay resting on her lap. She smiled and wished me a good morning. Her smile was warm, welcoming, but hidden behind it, I could see that she was not well. A hint of pain and a masked expression suggesting that there was more to this patient than originally thought. I spent the next 1.5 hours in her room, sitting across from her eye to eye in a chair. I learned not only about her symptoms, but her life. It took some time for her to trust me enough to tell me the secret intricacies of the life that she led in the States. Having moved to New York City to be a freelance photographer, she left Korea for a better life. Her family was quite poor, and she felt as though life in Korea was but a dead end. While arriving initially on a tourist visa, she never returned. She never saw a doctor because she felt as though care would not be provided because of her immigration status, and for fear that she may be reported and subsequently deported back to Korea. She later endorsed that she was told that she had a quote-unquote problem in her liver, but that the doctors had never taken the time to sit with her and explain adequately what she was supposed to do while in Korea to follow up with this problem. She also later endorsed that she had been having weight loss, night sweats, and that she could barely get any of her photography work done as she was so weak at times, weak enough to not be able to move from bed. I weighed heavily the need for exposing her to radiation, a young female, with a CAT scan of her belly. But given the comprehensive history and the extensive time I spent with her in the room, I felt that there was more to this than the eye could see. I did a CAT scan of the belly, and about 2 hours later I was called by the senior radiologist with a panic reading on the image. The words on the phone had to be repeated for me to comprehend the gravity of their meaning. 4 massive lesions in her liver, clinically consisted with advanced cancer of the liver, further evidence that there was extensive spread of this cancer to the rest of her abdomen, and that there were massive blood clots noted at the lower bases of her lungs. We had an urgent debriefing with my entire medical team, including my senior, junior residents, my medical students, in our conference room. The news was heartbreaking and sent chills through all of us. My senior resident, one of the best I had worked with in all of my career, a female, only 26 years old, herself broke down for the first time in all of my time of working with her. She asked if I could break the news to the patient, as it had become too emotionally overwhelming for her to discuss it with the patient alone. I walked into the patient's room and sat on the bed next to her. For the next hour, we spoke about the findings, the prognosis, and the options, which were fairly limited. She cried and hugged me and thanked me for at least being honest with her and clear and directed. I left the room almost shattered. I couldn't help but see my own life in her eyes, young, vibrant, with so many dreams yet to be fulfilled. I asked the patient if I could call her mother, and she noted that she would not like to tell her mother about the findings over the telephone, but that her uncle in Korea could be notified. My team and I worked tirelessly. We coordinated care between New York City and Korea with numerous interpreters, we held meetings with her friends here in New York City at her bedside, where they cried, laughed, and even collected enough funds to secure her a return ticket to Korea. We reached out to colleagues in Korea and were able to enroll her in a trial for advanced hepatocellular carcinoma, a cancer of the liver that carries an almost fatal diagnosis. We started the patient on blood thinners for her blood clots in her lungs, and we awaited the time that her flight should arrive to discharge her directly to the airport for her return. I was off that weekend after those couple of days of meeting her, but I couldn't sleep. I couldn't stop thinking about this patient, her life, and what the rest of her life would be. On Monday, when I returned to work, I entered the room first at 6:30 in the morning, eager to see her. The patient appeared clinically changed, not as responsive, sleepy, pale, with worsening abdominal pain. My residents were already aware that something was terribly wrong. Shortly after, blood tests and imaging would reveal that her tumors had started to bleed. She assigned her closest friend as a healthcare proxy, and our palliative care team met with her to discuss her advanced goals for life. Recognizing her prognosis and what her life would be with this disease, she decided that she would not want heroic measures in the event that she should have cardiac arrest. By Monday afternoon, just several hours after that, her blood counts began to drop dramatically. Our interventional radiologists at Mount Sinai, who are phenomenal, could not stop her bleeding. At 5 p.m. on the same day, the patient went into cardiac arrest while all of her friends were in the room. She passed away comfortably, without pain, surrounded by the only love that she had in our city. Standing at her bedside, it was almost surreal. I looked around and saw her friends sitting on the floor, comforting each other, my residents and my medical students hugging each other and crying right by the door. We had worked tirelessly on the cultural and individual aspects of this case, and yet we could not save Mrs. H. I felt as though we had failed. I called her mother over the phone, thousands of miles away, in Korea, with an interpreter, with her friends in the room nearby, and gave her the most terrible news of her life. She sobbed and could barely speak. She had no questions for me, and shortly thereafter the line went silent. On Thursday, almost 4 days later, I was called by patient relations that the mother of this patient would be arriving in New York City to claim the body of her daughter and to transport her back to Korea. She asked to meet me and my team, and a meeting room was set up. The patient's friends, myself, 3 interpreters, and my team sat in a conference room overlooking Central Park. An older woman, eyes red from crying, tired and slow moving, entered the room. Everyone bowed their head in respect. Everyone sat in silence for a few moments to acknowledge her presence. She took a seat right next to me and was introduced to all members of my team. Before I could even begin to speak, to express my condolences, she asked if she could speak first via the interpreter. I was sure in my mind that this would be an expression of anger for not doing more for her daughter, for not saving her life. After a few moments of silence, she gathered herself and said, "I came here to take my precious daughter, my only daughter, home, but I also came here, leaving my own country for the very first time in my life, to say thank you. Thank you to you and your team for being the mother I couldn't be, for being the caretaker I was not able to be, and the friends that my daughter needed at her most darkest hour. Thank you for calling, coordinating across the world all that you did and all that my family has told me you had done for my daughter. While I will never recover from the loss of my daughter, I am at ease knowing that the care you provided her was close to family as she could have had, and for that I am thankful." She bowed her head to myself and my team, leaned over and grabbed me in a tight hug that I will never, ever forget. She didn't let go for almost 5 minutes. As I left the building, almost an hour later, facing Central Park, it was the most beautiful of days. The sunshine, the smell of the grass from the park surrounded me. While I attempted the daunting task of hailing a taxi cab in New York City, I stood there. I could see out of the corner of my eye that the patient's mother exited the hospital as well. She stood just behind me. She stared at the sunshine, her shoulders relaxed, her face slightly less tense, and a sense of relief ever present in her eyes. I now recognize with clarity that from the moment that we put on our white coats and take our physician's oath and enter into the world of medicine, that we are more than just a physician. The white coat and its evolution from separate to united, from dark to pure, shapes our own individual and dynamic connectivity to our patients. We are parents, we are caregivers, and healers of both the body and the mind. The choices we make, the course of studies we pursue, and the patient encounters of our junior years will forever shape the type of physician we become. I spent 4 of the greatest years of my life in this country in this program. I learned to understand the cultural nuances with my trips on the Bedouin Mobile Care Unit. I adopted a seamless method of interacting with interpreters with the new immigrants of this country, and I thrived at adopting my skills and behaviors to local cultures on my trip to Vellore, India during my international clerkship. You will all shape your own journeys, form everlasting bonds, and most importantly, mold your practice of medicine to adapt to any patient anywhere in the world. So as you move forward this evening, remember, stop, savor the moment, and breathe. Your futures will be bright and fruitful, and your contributions to the practice of medicine will be immeasurable. I congratulate you on this most momentous occasion and welcome you as colleague and friend into this most amazing of professions. Good luck and good evening to you all.